That was one that, for whatever reason, I wanted to clap for, but I was too shy to do it. I don't know why. Thank you. In our church community, one of the great ministries that we celebrate is what Carr Wu and what Russ Townsley are doing with Artists Helping the Homeless. Now, if you know Wu, he was a couple of years ago selected as a finalist for Citizen of the Year for here in Kansas City. And he has earned the respect of so many people. Leaders of our city like Mayor Sly James, as well as the homeless on the streets. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be honest with you, I name drop Wu shamelessly. Because when I am talking with people out on the streets, and when they hear that I know Mr. Wu, and indeed that I can show them that I have him on speed dial, my stock goes up because of the reputation that he has made for himself because of the work that he has done. Artists Helping the Homeless has become one of the most respected ministries in our city. And Colonial Church is honored to be part of that. Now, Wu's incredible ministry got started. You may have known the story from this, but it got started by a really simple thing. Wu saw. He saw the homeless that were gathering outside of his art gallery. He saw them, and he was moved to be a blessing. That's how great things happen, with a simple act of seeing.
Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. A woman was there who had been disabled by a spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and couldn't stand up straight. When he saw her, Jesus called her to him and said, "Woman, you are set free from your sickness." He placed his hands on her, and she straightened up at once and praised God. The synagogue leader, incensed that Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, responded, "There are 6 days during which work is permitted. Come and be healed on those days, not on the Sabbath day." The Lord replied, "Hypocrites, don't each of you on the Sabbath untie your ox or donkey from its stall and lead it out to get a drink? Then isn't it necessary that this woman, a daughter of Abraham, bound by Satan for 18 long years, be set free from her bondage on the Sabbath day?" When he said these things, all his opponents were put to shame, but all those in the crowd rejoiced at all the extraordinary things he was doing.
Great things, miracles even, happen when you see, when you notice your neighbor in need. This year's Pledge Campaign is a celebration of the ways that we come together to make a difference. Because as a church community, there are a couple of things that I think that we do particularly well. One is that we work, and our Board of Outreach is very careful about this. Our Board of Outreach works with ministry partners here locally and around the world. But it doesn't just happen accidentally. We just don't pick things at random. The services that we get involved with, the things that we give money to, are things where we have skin in the game, where we have seen a need and we have already gone with our volunteering, where we are already, our hearts are already there and our money follows, because those two things are connected. With every dollar and with every hour of volunteer work that multiplies that, we become gospel. We become good news for the world. And this is the way of Christ. The other thing that we do really, I think, well, is see. We see those we should serve. I loved the responses when Mary Lee was talking to the kids up here. One of the things that from youngest ages in our congregation that we raise people up to do is to see, yes, but then to treat people with dignity. They get that. When we come to this weekly Sabbath time of worship, we always leave from here with ascending to see and to serve. Love of God comes with that expectation. That's being church. Now, our church community comes from a tradition. We came from someplace. And it's actually several traditions. We united in the United Church of Christ. And last week, we were celebrating our continuing work for justice, a legacy in our collective DNA, largely from our Congregationalist ancestors. But we've also inherited a gift from our E side. And the E's were hundreds and thousands of immigrants, German immigrants mostly, that they came as refugees from the Napoleonic Wars that were devastating Eastern Europe. And so they fled the starvation, they fled the intense poverty, and risked everything to come to this nation for safety and to start over again. Now, largely these Germans that came over, they were farmers. They were not as educated as the Congregationalists out eastward. They came as farmers here to the Midwest. And they made St. Louis their center. I was trained at the E Seminary, Eden in St. Louis. And they kind of at Eden, even though it's just part of the UCC now, they kind of spoon feed you a little bit of E tradition, little by just being there. And the one gift that I think the E's had in spades was that they saw. They saw the needs around them of the marginalized, and they knew in their hearts, they had good hearts, that it was Christ's way of compassion to do something to help. Now, you look back almost 200 years later, and it sounds almost too easy, and that's right. Because there are always a million reasons not to help. Maybe it requires you to break the rules. Human rules and regulations that would keep a person bound to their misery for 18 years until somebody speaking a word of gospel says, I don't care if it's Sabbath. Healing happens now. Maybe one of those reasons is you sit there and go, we just don't have the money. And that's real. There's almost never enough. And all of those German E's, they settled into their farming lives around St. Louis. And cholera broke out. And it was so bad that 1 in 5 people in St. Louis, 20% of the population of St. Louis died. There is nothing that we have faced in recent memory that even comes close to that. The number of orphaned children in St. Louis went through the roof. Now, there was a pastor that was actually, he was passing through St. Louis when one of these cholera outbreaks broke out, and it killed the people that were supposed to take him out to the Pacific Northwest where he was going to go work. He was going out to serve a congregation out there, and because he couldn't get out there, he was drafted into service of St. Peter's Church. And what turned out to be a prolonged layover in St. Louis of 20, 30 years. His name was Louis Palau. And Louis had the gift. He saw. He saw the children in St. Louis that were living and dying in the streets. And so he went to his church community and he said, we need to build an orphanage. Now, this church could barely keep the doors of itself open, let alone build an orphanage. And there is always a million reasons not to do something. You showed up on the wrong day. We don't do healings today. We're closed today for that, so come back another day. Or as someone at St. Peter's Church told Pastor Louis, we don't have enough to start an orphanage. But this is the gift of faith when you see something. You see something that God has put in front of your face, and you know that by God you were called to serve, to do something about it. So he responded to this person in his church who rightly said, we don't have enough. And he said, yes, we do. We have an orphan. He saw. Wu sees. And from that seeing came the faith that this present pain can be healed. It does not have to stand. That is the faith of Jesus Christ. It is our reason for being. Now, Pastor Nolau, he stayed with that little German St. Peter's church for years. And what he found in those German farmers was not a lot of money, but what he found is that they had heart. They cared. Now, yeah, there were those naysayers. Absolutely. There aren't any time and place. But nobody even remembers them. What is remembered? What lives on after them was what was built with compassion. After building this little orphanage here, and it's not little, they built a huge orphanage in St. Louis. They saw something else, that little congregation. They saw St. Louis prior to the Civil War, a slave state. If you were black, it meant you didn't go to the hospital. You suffered and died. These German immigrants weren't okay with that. So they decided to build a hospital in which all people would be served. Black and white, men and women, Jew and Christian. They wrote it into the initial mission statement of the hospital that they built, that all were welcome. How about that? Boy, I tell you, you talk about the UCC, our roots go way back. That little orphanage continued. It's still there in St. Louis today. And it became known as Evangelical Children's Home, ECH. And today it continues its ministry, but not just in St. Louis, but here in Kansas City too. We just know it by another name. It's Stepping Stone. It's that we've done drives for Stepping Stone to support them today. It all got started with this little church 150 years ago. Our Vacation Bible School has done drives to support it. A portion of what you give each week to this congregation goes to support Stepping Stone. Now today, we are not serving the victims of cholera epidemics, the survivors. But if you know anything by talking to the homeless in our community, you know that we have a lot of kids that are growing up without parents. That can be due to incarceration, it can be due to drugs, it can be for a whole slew of factors. Ask Wu. Stepping Stone helps to give these kids the skills that they are going to need to live. Here's a story from one of their people today.
ECH Everett is dedicated to helping children and families through a wide variety of programs. ECH has been there for Melissa through Stepping Stone and Early Education Center. For Melissa, ECH helps her plan a better future.
I had a work with fantasy
met Melissa. She's an amazing young woman. She's in her 20s now. And when she was a kid, when she got money, you spent it because you didn't know if somebody was going to come along and take it. ECH gave her the tools that she needed to not only to save for her own education, she put herself through school. And now that she's a mom, she comes back to Stepping Stone to teach other kids that are going through what she went through how they can become productive citizens and leaders. This is how the legacy of love continues. It continues beyond us. And we are part of that. Now, it's easy to get sidetracked by the millions of reasons that we all feel overwhelmed today. The millions of reasons not to help. People are incredibly busy today, and there's no lie. And the problems that we face today, they seem huge. Don't you think they seemed a little huge when 20% of the population had just died? Fewer people are involved in church. So it can feel like we don't have enough. Of course, that's exactly what that person in Pastor Louis Nolau's church said too. But here's the thing. Incarnating good news starts so simple. It starts just by seeing. See the need. And then serve it in whatever way you can. Because what I have seen is that there is a spiritual power in this world. And it is not contained in churches. It is a spirit of service that lives in the hearts of human beings. And when we inspire and amplify that spirit, it can bring us together. And I'm not just talking about us as church. I'm talking about people who mistrust church, but have hearts for humanity. It is a power that is greater than any problem that we face. It is a power that is greater than any excuse we can offer. When we come together and when we work with anybody who will work with us to help address the needs that we see in our neighbors today, when our story is told eventually, when people look back at the time and the days that you have lived, let it be said of us that we lived a life of compassionate service. In the face of dark days, of changing world, let our story be the good news that is still worth sharing. You are part of something here, something that is bigger than you, something that we come together to continue to be good news, that we teach our children, because there is hope now and there always will be. You are part of a legacy of love and light that was there before you, and it will continue after us. May we continue to be that light and life from now until our life's finale, because that spirit goes with us now and always. Amen.